All right, like your narrator's justification for being back on the camera or back talking like this. Um, I mean, the most amazing that the sort of game. That's a game. That thing that's going on. I mean, that's like quite frankly, that's like our Rubik's cube incident. That's really like interesting. Like it's meant to be like figured out. And then when there was the new like there came out back to this area and there was the usual like that's the indication like that's a game like so we're playing a game. Um, I'm gonna guess like yeah okay that's not a guess that like right because I said in the other um I said in the other video like what I said about all the things that went on when Clinton was president like I did say like I said well things that I said like the one thing I said that maybe is I think what is the if you don't know like what do I mean like the harm done to African Americans that period or like what do I mean like the mass incarceration because I forget that we're like I know people in California and certainly now that there's a game like people but I always assume people here where it was applied told it was a place where everyone's very politically awake but no we don't know who's seeing this maybe like we don't know who's seeing this so I don't it's not just that like Cali, someone would say like, "I shut up." Everyone knows that. Like, well, right? Everyone in Cal, I'm thinking like, nah, someone sees this somewhere else. We think. Um, what do I mean? Well, I mentioned that the thing that gets me accused of being a right wing nut, like that this thing was this guy who worked at. I mentioned that this is the Idaho thing that he had been a factory worker who was like sort of I think he was fired from the factory for like attempting to wake up the workers, but it was happening to the working class. But the thing is, the fact that you work in a factory, like you see, that's what was when I say that like okay, look, if you don't, I mean, if you don't know, I don't know either. I mean, I don't know who sees these and what they're aware of. First of all, like Bill Clinton's like the main thing he did was to move the Democratic Party like far over to the right. He's essentially like a Republican. If I mean that's the best way to put it. Like he was a moderate Republican is what he would basically. But what he did was finish off this neoliberal project. And the thing is, let me say something about that before I get to like how that like the harm that came to African Americans during that period actually put it in a situation where like conditions for like poor African Americans are, believe it or not, they're worse than it was when the society was extremely racist. Like that he Clinton part of the game he played was like that was the era when like political correctness was like part of the agenda. Like this is when you say African Americans, you don't say black people anymore. Like you don't. I mean, when they called everything like the way to speak. That was like I mean, I'm glad it's sort of civilized the way we talk, but no, I mean they basically cover for putting conditions for poor African Americans back to like I said, it became and still is like worse, far worse than it was when the society was extremely racist. That's twisted. Um, but we were also signaled like geez, right before the game. That's a game. I mean, it was close like our Rubik's cube thing, but right before that there was a signal about Chicago. So let me say the oh and oh, gosh, everything's connected. But maybe that's why we play a schizophrenia game. Okay, the roots of this thing that happened to African Americans under Clinton, but also it devastated everyone who was poor and the working class. Like it's part of why like no one can. I mean, you can't. You have to be like a billionaire to like live now. I mean, it's like you need to be a person. Or a person from a mind put it this way, you need to be what used to be just wealthy in order to like live properly at all. Like there isn't really the money lost value. Um, okay, here's what happened, but this being signaled about Chicago, I'm gonna take it this way. A lot of people don't know what September 11th is the anniversary of. Okay, this thing this project that's been going on for a while, like that Clinton really ramped up with these trade policies. That's what they were trying to stop in Seattle. which they couldn't stop because they were being told it's like a bunch of anarchists or something, which is like doesn't represent it. In case people don't know, this thing that was like cooked up at like the Chicago, like the University of Chicago, like graduate or economics department, where they basically cooked up like a one-sided class war against like the entire like the working class, the working poor, the poor, and certainly African Americans. So cooked up, and they cooked it up on a blackboard. Like this is the part. This is also how we ended up in like an economy where they basically abandoned the real economy. That was what they did. Like they perceive work. I mean, that's what they did, and it came out of this thing called the Chicago Department of Economics. And before it came here, they like ran it in the laboratory of where they used the country as a laboratory to test these like theories out. And it brought like Chilean graduate students over, trained them at the University of Chicago in these like new demented theories, and like tried it out in Chile. And like I said, I don't know what level of awareness we're like who we're talking to when we make these. So sorry if you already know this. I hear something banging. I don't know if that's like part of our game. Um, right, they tried this thing out in Chile to see what would happen. This involves like privatizing the whole economy and financializing everything. And this is also where the idea came from that like got used again in other like military things. That, and this is so sick, but like part of the economic theory is like if you were to traumatize an entire like country by the way in which you like do the like overthrow of the government, that the psychological trauma will facilitate the shift to this new form of like economy that was designed on the blackboard. Okay, and then Clinton did it here. It just like was a lot less violent because like you can't do that here. So like this it that's why at that time, for example, like 90% of the attempts for like workers to like factory workers like Randy Weaver to organize for like higher wages or attempts to unionize, they used one of their weapons of class war was to build all like excess capacity in places like Mexico and stuff, and just threaten them like if you strike or you ask for like wages that are like decent, like we'll just shift production to like places like Mexico, and then they did it, because they could get like or shift production to high repression areas where they get like people who are like doing work like guarded by machine guns for like poverty wages. By doing that, that totally took away all the kind of work that was available for people who are not formally educated and maybe not articulate. Okay, which is what's required for this new like service economy, even though no one makes any money anyway. But like, right, that structurally adjusted like poor African Americans completely out of the economy. That is to say, like they didn't do what they do in other countries and like get rid of them like but they became there was no work for such people anymore. Then the only thing to do to not starve is to go into the underground economy. Means like selling like marijuana, doing or selling drugs, doing these things. Um, and then it just they along with these like new policies where they shifted like all like factory work and production out of the country. They passed a very harsh like anti-crime bill that was like what to do when if you're going to create social disintegration, you have to police it. So that started this thing of like the mass incarceration of African Americans and our new like prison labor economy, which is growing all the time. That's what I was talking about. One of the things I was talking about that happened to African Americans when Clinton was president. In case that's what I was being signaled about. But that is a game down there. It was pretty cool what you're doing down there. I mean that part of the city, just that I just went through.